Hey, good talk, everybody. Sorry for the little delay. Okay, again, the learning is Leila Nishmas Yehuda Shimon ben Yeshua Yosef Moshe, and our Yelev Zechron Baruch ben Yeshua Adam Zalman. The neshamas should have an aliyah. I'm going to ask. First of all, I apologize for last week. I cut out too early before some people had questions. So, if you don't mind reposting those questions, and then we'll try and answer them tonight. I'm going to try and ask for more questions because we're going to start with the nitty-gritty of Hilchos Muktza, which can be quite, it can be complicated, but we're going to try and simplify it. But part of simplifying things is people asking questions. So please feel free to post the questions, and I will not log off until all the questions are answered. Also, I am away for Shabbos, so I'm stuck hiding in my bedroom where I am for Shabbos doing the shir. So I can't. It's like four walls around me. I don't know if my brain ever works. It certainly doesn't work as well being stuck in the bedroom hiding out. So if I'm saying something that doesn't sound clear, so please let me know, and I'll try and clarify it. Okay, so just to review from last week, we said that Muktza is the Rabbanan. Again, that's the main rule that we have to understand, that Muktza is totally a Gezerah. I don't know if Gezerah is the right word, but it's a takana from the Chachamim in order to make our Shabbos seem to be more Shabbosdik. Why is it so important to know that it's from the Rabbanan? Because when the Rabbanan make a takana, they have the wherewithal and the ability to take back the takana, and they have the ability to decide when the takana applies, when the takana does not apply. So, and the reason why that's so important, because there can be a very fine line between what you're allowed to move and what you're allowed to move, and when you're not allowed to move and when you are allowed to move it, and different types of things. So again, let's just review. According to the Torah, there is no such thing as Muktza. You can move everything. According to the Rabbanan, let's start with this premise, and then hopefully we'll get it clear. According to the Rabbanan, everything, they started off with everything is Muktza. The Chacham said every single thing is not allowed to be moved. I know that sounds strange, but that's what we're going to focus on tonight. It sounds strange in everything. So how do you eat? Right? How do you eat if everything is Muktza? So we'll get back to that. But the basic way to approach Muktza is that from the Torah, everything is mutter. From the Rabbanon, everything is asr. Then we just have to fit into all the different categories where the Rabbanon said it's mutter, and then you sort of make like a checklist or a chessboard where you move in the different types of muktzas, and then that will help clarify when you're allowed to move things, when you're not allowed to move things. And again, the reason why we said it's important to know what's Muktza, because I think the number one thing that people, I don't want to say yell, but people say, hey, how can you move that? How can you touch that? It's Muktza. That's most times that Muktza has the ability to be moved. Certainly if the Muktza is already in the person's hand, on almost all situations, that person can continue holding it and moving it until they can place it down. So there's really no reason to ever say out, certainly in public, that somebody's holding Muktza and they're not familiar with the halachas or whatever it is, and say to them, hey, put it down, Muktza. We just can do it calmly and go with them quietly and say, by the way, I think that's Muktza, but then why don't you go out of the room and then put it down? Doesn't have to be an embarrassing thing, and especially we said to children, and it gives a very bad taste to children when they get told, it's Muktza, and then maybe later on they found that it wasn't even Muktza in the first place, or it was Muktza, but it was able to be moved. Okay, so again, let's start with the premise that everything is Muktza, and then we'll start checking off the list of what's not Muktza. Okay, so now, but before we do that, let's just go through all the types of Muktza. Might be worthwhile to write this down. I know. I mean, some have told me that they do take notes. I'm not telling you they have to take notes. This is not school. But if you do take notes, you might have an easier time, at least writing down the main muksas. So basically, again, from the Torah, there's no muksa. Sorry for keeping on reiterating that, but it's important to know that. From the Torah, there's no muksa. From the Rabbanon, let's start with everything is muksa. And under that, they put a bunch of categories, but there's really 4 main categories of what's muksa. And then there's some minor categories of what's muksa. Okay, so the first muksa that we have to know, again, we're going to go through all of these right now, and then we'll start breaking them down, Be'ez Hashem, over the next few weeks. So the first muksa is muksa machmas gufay, or gufo, as some pronounce it. Right, so muksa machmas gufay literally most people translate as the body. It doesn't, I mean, it sort of means that here. It means that it's muksa because of its use. Its use is inherently muksa, meaning its use is something that can't be used on Shabbos. The classic example of muksa machmas gufa is money and rocks. Let's just go with those 2 very basic. There's nothing you could do with money on Shabbos because we're not allowed to purchase anything. So therefore, money, there is absolutely no use to have that on Shabbos. That's the strictest category of muksa, and a rock. What are you going to do with a rock on Shabbos? Now, there are certain scenarios where you can make it not muksa from before Shabbos. We'll get to that soon, Be'ez Hashem. Right? But muksa machmas gufa, that's category number 1. That is something that you absolutely, there's no need for it on the way, it's not, meaning there could be a need for it on Shabbos, but the normal, if using this in the normal ways would be something that you can't do on Shabbos. A rock, you can't use a rock on Shabbos. You can't use money on Shabbos. Paint would be another example. And there's many examples, but those are the basic things. So basically, the way you have to do it, you have to understand is that it itself has no use for you on Shabbos whatsoever. If you decide that you're gonna need this thing on Shabbos, which can happen, then there's a way, like we said with Muktza, there's a way around everything in Muktza because it's the Rabbanon, right? So therefore, you can't. There is a workaround, but the lichatchila is that anything that can't be used on Shabbos would be muksa because of it itself. Right? That's number 1. Then you have 2. Again, there's not necessarily the order that you may find in the poskim. Different. I checked into different svarim to see what order they have. Everybody has a different order to try and explain this as clearly as possible. So we're going to go with that. The first muksa is, it's intrinsically muksa. There's nothing that you can do with this on Shabbos, at least lechatchila. Okay, that's 1. 2 would be muksa machmas chisaron kis, right? Which literally translated means it's muksa because of a loss of, literally a kiss means a wallet, that you might lose a wallet. That's a literal translation. What it means is that it's muksa because it's so valuable that you will never move it unless necessary. Now, we'll break that down. But basically, what it would mean is that even something that's not muksa from guf, let's say a knife, right? Let's say a knife, a very valuable knife, which we'll put it, let's say the knife for a moil. So a moil's knife, since it's, yes, theoretically a knife, you can use that knife to cut your meat, you can use that knife to cut your challah. If your moil uses that knife to cut your meat or your challah, I would suggest use a different moil, right? But meaning the moil will never ever take that knife, hopefully, and use it to cut his meat or to cut his challah. So that means that's something he's concerned about, his knife getting damaged, rightfully so. So therefore, that's also muksa. That's muksa machmas chisaron kis. Right? So that would be, meaning, just to use an example as we said before, that we're going down a checklist. So we said the first muksa is that it's intrinsically muksa, right? So that's a rock, money, right? So we put a knife, that's not intrinsically muksa. A knife is not muksa. I could use a knife on Shabbos. I imagine most of us use a knife on Shabbos at some point. But this has an additional muksa, which is that it's a very valuable knife, And since it's so valuable that you would never use it other than for its intended use, which in this case would be a bris, therefore it has another level of muktza. So therefore that would still be a problem. Okay, so that's category number 2, is if it's muktza because it's a monetary loss, right? You're afraid. So I'll tell you just a practical example just to try and bring it out a little bit, is a cell phone. This is a fairly common question. Can a person use the cell phone as an alarm clock on Shabbos, right? And you want to set an alarm for your cell phone, and can you then move the alarm or move the cell phone? So now that would depend on how do you treat your cell phone. Some people treat their cell phone with kid gloves. They will not let anybody handle it. They'll keep it always in the proper place, and it doesn't get thrown around. And if that's the case for them, they would not be able to move the cell phone because they're afraid of loss. Other people take their cell phones and just throw it on the floor, put it on the floor, and they don't really particularly care. So let kids play with it. So they don't care. So for them, there would be a heter to move it in certain situations, right? Which might seem odd, right? You come walking through your house with a cell phone in your hand on Shabbos, and people might look at you like you're a little crazy. But the bottom line is there are scenarios on Shabbos where you are 100% allowed to move your cell phone, depending on the situation. Okay, so that would be an example of whether for you that's considered a loss or not. So that's category number 2. Category number 3 is kli shemala. Well, it's the okay. Yeah, let's go with that one first. There's something called a kli, a utensil whose malacha is for iser, right? Which I think we mentioned it last week in one of our examples. You have a hammer or a scissors, not a food scissors, but a scissors for arts and crafts, or a hammer. So those things are, you're not going to say they're intrinsically muktza, because you can use the scissors to cut your food if theoretically you wanted to, meaning there is a way that you could use it, unless obviously it's a very expensive scissors, in which case you would never use it. Then like a seamstress may not let anybody use her scissors. So that might be from the category 2 that we said, right? But this is a utensil that's normally used for iser. So then that also will have a separate set of rules of muktza. Okay, like the hammer, it really is muktza. But if you needed that hammer to do something mutter, then you'd be allowed to use it on Shabbos. Right? So if you needed that hammer to break open nuts or something like that, then you would be able to use it. So that's category number 3. Right? And then we have, as subcategories of these above categories, is muktza machmas mios. If it's muktza because it's disgusting, right? Which doesn't necessarily have to mean that it's muktza, but if it's something that's disgusting, then you wouldn't be allowed to move it. Because again, what is the whole takana of the chachamim? The takana of the chachamim is that something that it's about making something not Shabbos-dik. The chachamim wanted us to have Shabbos prop. So if it's something that we're really disgusted in moving, so if you move that on Shabbos, that's taking away a little bit from the enjoyment of Shabbos. So you wouldn't be able to just move something that's disgusting, again, unless it fits in to the other parameters, which we're going to do Bez Hashem. And then you have Muktza Machmas Isser, which is also a pretty strict Muktza, which is that if the thing itself would be mutter, but meaning there's nothing intrinsically wrong with this thing, but there's an isser to handle it or isser to eat it, then it would become muksa. For example, meat, let's say for an animal is not a good example. Let's talk about doesn't apply in America so much, but let's say you have fruits and vegetables that didn't have chumas and mices taken off of, right? So, or let's use a better example. You forgot to take off challah. You didn't do hafrashas challah from your challah. So you're not allowed to eat that challah. And then you remember on Shabbos that 1 second, I didn't take off challah. So challah is not muktzah, and you'll be able to you take off the challah, then it becomes not muktzah. But right now, it's muktzah because it's usr. Now, there is a way to separate challah on Shabbos, which is beyond the scope. If anybody wants to know how, just remind me at the end of the shir and we can go through that. There is a way in America, in Eretz Yisrael, and not America, and Chutz La'aretz, there is a way to take off challah if you forgot on Shabbos. In Eretz Yisrael, there is no way to do it. So therefore, in Eretz Yisrael, if somebody realizes that they forgot to do Afroshas challah on Shabbos, then that challah becomes muktza. It becomes muktza machmas iser, because since it's usher to eat that challah, then you can't do anything with it. Therefore, you are not. That's in another level of muktza. But when the first example that I started to say, the reason why that's not muktza machmas iser, which would be, let's say, treifa meat. So treifa meat you can't eat. So maybe that should be muktza. The truth is, it would be muktza. But if you have a pet, your own pet, that would eat that meat, then it's not muktza, because you're allowed to. You would be theoretically able to feed that meat, the treifa meat, to the pet. So therefore, you would be allowed to take that meat and handle it and move it for the pet. Okay, so that's basically. Those are the basic. What did I say? 5. I think that was 5 we went through. Again, just look at the gufay, which means it's intrinsically muktza. Muktza because of a loss. You're afraid from a loss. That would be 2. Then we have utensils that are normally used for muktza. That would be 3. Then we have something muktza that's disgusting. For example, feces or garbage or something like that. That's really disgusting. And then you have muktza that's there because of isser. Right? So something's usser, so you're not allowed to move it. Okay, so those are the basic categories, and we're gonna have to try and go through that. Yeah. So now let's cut back. Now that we have all these muktzas, so over the next couple of weeks, we're going to go through that, and now we'll learn a halacha that might come as a shock to many. I mean, when I first learned this, I don't know how many years ago, it came as a shock to me. It doesn't really have a practical application, so don't anybody get nervous, or make sure to listen for the next few minutes and get it till the end. But like we said, everything is muktza. When the Chachamim made the takana, the Chachamim said that everything is muktza. That applies even nowadays. Okay, so when we say everything is muktza, then that means everything is muktza. And that's what we started off with, meaning a chair is muktza, a utensils, muktza, plates, muktza. Right, so they started with everything that it's muktza, except if you need it. So this is called a kli. In the Pasuk, this is called a kli shemalachta leheter. Right, we said before that there's something called a kli shemalachta leisser, which is a utensil that's normally used for isser. Here, it's called a kli shemalachta leheter, which is basically anything that you're allowed to use on Shabbos. Is a utensil that's used for heter. The psak with that is, you know what? I'm sorry. I apologize. We should have done one more step before we did this. There are three adjectives, I guess, for lack of a better word, that the Chacham use for what types of movement you're allowed to do for muktza. Again, so let's, if anybody's taking notes, I apologize. Let's just back up for one step. We said that there's 5 major muktzas. Now we're going to say that there's 3 ways that we're allowed to move muktza. There's 3 reasons why one would be allowed to move muktza. One is, again, gufay, where you need the actual item that you're moving. You need the chair in order to sit on it. That would be for the guf of the chair. You need the body of the chair. That's where you're moving the chair. Sometimes you don't need the item. You need the place that the item is in. For example, you don't need the chair, but you need the spot where the chair is in order to stand there for whatever reason. So that would be moving it from mekaimai, for its place. And then you have what the Chacham call mechama letzel, that you want to move something from the sun to the shade. That is a sort of a code word for moving it for the muktza's sake, for the item's sake, meaning You don't need the chair. You don't need the chair. You don't need the spot where the chair is. But the chair is in the sun, and it's going to get, it's going to take all the color out of the chair if you leave it in the sun like that. So you want to move the chair from the sun to the shade so it doesn't get damaged, right? Another example, or a more common example, would be the rain, right? You left your coat by mistake outside in the rain, and you want to move that coat from the rain inside the house. So there you're not moving it because you need the coat, and you're not moving it because you need the place where the coat is, but you're moving it because you don't want the coat to get ruined. So you're moving it for the coat's sake. Those are the three different movements that you could possibly have for Muktza. Again, you want to move it for gufay, which is you need the actual item. So using the chair example, or a coat, you need to use your coat because you need to go outside, so you need a coat. That would be gufay. Makaimai is you don't need your coat, or you don't need the chair, you just need the place where the coat is, right? Somebody comes in, throws the coat on the chair. Now you want to move the coat because you need the place where the coat is. That's mekaimai. Or you have your coat that you left outside and you don't want it to get ruined, so you're moving it inside. That's for mechama litzel. Then you're moving it for the muksas, for the item's sake. Okay, so now with that, and that's in those three rules are very important to know, but we'll try and keep clarifying them as we go through the muktza. So again, now going back to our example, everything is muktza. Kli shemalachta leheter. The Chachamim said originally, they said everything is muktza. Now obviously, this basic stuff that you need to live, they said is not muktza. So that would be forks, plates, spoons, etc. That's not muktza. Everything else the Chachamim said is muktza. But klisha melachta leheter, if it's something that's normally used for heter, the Chachamim said that's mutter to move if you have any need whatsoever, whether you need the item itself, whether you need the place, or whether you even need to move it in order to protect it. That's all mutter, as long as this thing is a klisha melachta leheter, as long as it's something that you use for heter, meaning it's something that can be used on Shabbos, right? So example, like we said, a chair, utensils, books, right? Those are all klisha melachta leheter. And the reason why you've never heard of this is because we use these things that's what we use regularly on a minute to minute basis. So therefore, those are not muktza. However, and here's where the stringency comes in. Let's say you don't have any of these three reasons. You don't need the place where it is. You don't need the coat, and you don't need it to protect it, right? For example, you took off your coat and you put it onto your bed, right? Now, you don't really care that it's on your bed. You're not going in your bed. It's Shabbos afternoon. You're not going to your bed, and you're not going out anymore, so you don't need your coat, right? And you just sit on the bed and you just push the coat away for no reason, that you're not allowed to do, okay? Well, 1 second. That coat is not a good example, but because again, anything that you need on a day-to-day basis, the Chachamim didn't make this takana, right? So for again, what do you call it? How do you say? What was the example of this? What's a good example? A chair, right? So a chair, or anything that gets used on a very steady basis doesn't apply. So clothing, this doesn't apply to. Books, this doesn't apply to, and it doesn't apply to utensils, okay? But everything else is going to be in some form, it's going to be muktza. Oh, jewelry also doesn't apply. So if you're going to look for your jewelry and you're messing around in the jewelry box looking for that would also be fine. But let's say you're nervous and you're just moving a cup, like let's say the example I heard somebody say was you're sitting by a speech and you're getting a little restless. So you want to just, you start playing around with a cup. So again, I said I think I might have said that utensils are not included in this. Utensils, it's debatable. It's a machlokes whether utensils have this. Meaning we're saying that anything that normally gets used on a minute-to-minute basis, like books, food, clothing, don't have it. So you can take your food, move it around the refrigerator, move it on the counter for any reason. That's regular, the normal way to live. But furniture, not like that, right? So again, so let's say you have a chair sitting in the corner of your house, your apartment, whatever it is, and you decide you want to move that chair. You have no reason that you're moving that chair. You don't need to sit on it. You don't need the place, and there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with the chair that you need to move it. That chair is Muktza, and you're not allowed to move it on Shabbos, right? Same thing goes with let's say toys, right? Toys for sure. You have no reason whatsoever to move the toy. You're moving it simply because you're just in the mood to move it. That would not be allowed. You're not allowed to move it on Shabbos. So basically what we're saying is that everything is Muktza, again, other than clothing, food, books, jewelry goes under clothing, right? Now, the reason why this is not so Nageya and it doesn't really apply is because there's almost always a good reason. If I'm sitting in my house and I don't like the way the chair looks in that corner and I want to move it to the other corner, there's a reason, right? There's a reason to do that, right? So the only scenario where you would have is where you absolutely don't need it to move for any reason whatsoever, right? So then that would be usher. So here's the scenario that gets a little complicated is a utensil like a cup, and you're just sitting there and you're by a Shabbos meal or a speech, and it's taking very long, and you want to just take the cup and you start, moving it in your hand, moving it back and forth, etc., etc. Can you do that? Is that called a need or not? Right? Is that really called moving it for a particular reason or not? So the answer is that it's a disagreement, but the bottom line is we are lenient, and we say moving something for nerves would be allowed. So moving something for nerves is allowed because nerves is something. Nerves is something. Again, we're not talking about somebody who has nerves that they need to move it for their actual nerves. Then that's for sure okay, right? Meaning somebody has to. Some people like the fidget spinners, let's say, right? So you want to use a fidget spinner, or you want to just shake a fork because it just helps. It helps you with your nerves. That's for sure enough of a reason. But we're talking about where you don't really have nerves. You just bored stiff during a speech, or bored during a meal, and you want to just play around with the silverware that's on the table. So the bottom line is most poskim will say that that's allowed, but it's not so simple. It's really not so simple to just move these things around. But that goes under the category of kli shemalachtai leheter. Okay, again, it's not so pertinent that situation, but it's just good to know that to understand where they're coming from with the Hilchos Muktza, that it's that would be whether that's allowed or not. So okay, so let's start with the first category, which is Muktza machmas gufay, right? Meaning that it intrinsically is also, right? So basically, before we go through all the examples, maybe we'll leave that for next week because it's a longer subject. But let's discuss how you make something not Muktza before. Let's say it's let's use our rock example. Right, so you decide that on Shabbos before Shabbos you do need the rock. Once Shabbos starts, you cannot decide to need the rock. That's too late. But before Shabbos, you can decide, hey, I need these rocks. Let's say the kids want to play with the rocks, or you need the rock to hold open a door, or anything like that. So the best way to do it before Shabbos is to pick up the rock. The real best way would be to do something to the rock to show that it's no longer your standard rock and you're using it as something to open the door or something like that. That would be the best. Like you paint it or you do something like that. But really that's not so necessary. You can just have it in your mind some say it's better to verbalize it and say that rock right over there that's in my yard. You say this on Friday before Shabbos. That rock or sand or even money. A fellow wants to ask the question. He wants to use a dollar bill for a speech by a offer or something like that. And can he use a dollar bill? So yeah, Baruch Hashem, he asked about it before Shabbos. So once you decide that that dollar bill is not Muktza on Shabbos, and you decided it before Shabbos, then that's okay, right? So then it's allowed. You're allowed to use that dollar bill over Shabbos. Now there is a debate in the poskim whether you're allowed to make it not Muktza just for that Shabbos, and then you want it to go back to its original status. Best thing to do is to decide that it's no longer Muktza forever, right? Now, once he decides to take that dollar and he's putting it back to something that he's going to spend, then that's no longer forever because now it's going to become Muktza again. So yes, the best thing would be for him to do is to say that this dollar is now a prop and it's never money anymore, and therefore it's Muktza. And then I guess it would be better that he never spends that dollar. I didn't tell that to him though, because I don't know why I didn't tell it to him. Probably because I wasn't learning Muktza at that time, so I didn't think about it. But bottom line is there are many poskim that say you can make it just on Muktza for that Shabbos, and that's it. Okay, so that would be the best way to do it, is to actually decide. But again, it has to be done before Shabbos. Best thing to do would be to pick it up or to do something to it. But if not, then just having it in mind that it's no longer Muktza is going to do that. Is going to do it for you. Meaning, I'm sorry, I jumped the gun. Meaning you just do it before Shabbos. Can you have somebody make it not Muktza for you? You would be allowed to get somebody to do it for you, but as long as they have the rights. Meaning I can't go into somebody's yard and say that their rock is not Muktza because that's not my rock. It's their rock. So therefore, you are you can't do it. Now you can ask the person to do it for you. That would be fine. But you cannot do it when it belongs to somebody else. Okay, so I think I'm gonna stop over here. So I haven't seen too many questions come through. The only question I have here is, are you allowed to adjust an automatic watch? So the question is, oh yes, an automatic watch could theoretically become Muktza. It's a question of what type of Muktza it is, but the bottom line is what the poskim say is that the watch is allowed to be wound on Shabbos if it was wound before Shabbos. Okay, so if you're allowed to, if you have the watch wound before Shabbos, then you would be able to, as long as it doesn't die. Once it dies, then you're no longer allowed to make it go. But as long as it's not dead, you'd be able to continue it. It's more if it's dead, then you have to put it down, right? So yeah, somebody once asked me if they have these shakers that shake the watch to make sure that they stay on. Can you put your watch onto that thing that shakes on Shabbos? So that would depend on if the machine is going to work harder by you placing the watch on it, then you wouldn't be able to put it on it. But if it's not going to work any harder and you obviously had it running from before Shabbos, then that would be okay. Okay, garbage cans. We're going to get to that Bez Hashem in future weeks, but since it was asked, so we'll discuss it. Yes, I'm going to review everything. Again, Bez Hashem. So a garbage can really depends on what type of garbage you put in there. It's certainly you can't move a garbage can for no reason. That's for sure. The question is, what status does a garbage can have? So what are the options? It could be gufa because you have no reason to move a garbage can if there's garbage in it. On the other hand, we didn't discuss one of the haterim to move Muktza is what we call graf shalrei, which we haven't discussed yet, which is if something is disgusting, you're allowed to move it out of the room. So that goes for any category of Muktza. So a garbage can, if it's sitting in your house and the garbage smells, so then you could move the can, right? The question is, If it's not disgusting, meaning some people want to take the garbage and bring it to the table and throw the garbage out so they don't have to make round trips, back and forth to the kitchen. So therefore, they want to move the garbage can in. So that would really depend on the status of the garbage. The problem is that nowadays that we put a lot of disposable plastic into the garbage, meaning normal garbage is muktza. So therefore, you should not be able to move a garbage can. However, you put in empty water bottles and plastic plates, which unfortunately or fortunately, we're very spoiled. So in America, we take disposable utensils that in Eretz Yisrael they wouldn't throw out. Certainly in poor economies they wouldn't throw out. And forget about telling somebody from Europe 100 years ago would see what we throw out. They would think we're totally crazy. Theoretically, we could use these plastics for a long time, but because we're wealthy, so therefore, or relatively wealthy, they're really not muktza because they could be reused. We just don't reuse it, right? So those are all the issues with garbage cans. We'll discuss it Bez Hashem at a later time. Okay, on the same subject as garbage. So. And there are many that have pets. Certainly during Corona, many people have gotten pets. So what about when the pet goes to the bathroom, right? So that is muktza machmas mius, because most people find that disgusting. But the way out for that is like we just discussed. If it's something disgusting and it's bothering you that it's in the room, then you are allowed to remove it from the room. And once you remove it from the room, you can remove it to wherever it is that you want to take it to. Then you can take, or if a kid goes to the bathroom on the floor, it's disgusting. Therefore, you are allowed to move it. The question becomes that somebody walks their dog in the street on Shabbos and the dog goes to the bathroom, right? Now, if it's disgusting for you, walk away, right? Just walk away. Now, maybe it's going to be disgusting for others, but there's nobody there at that point. So maybe that's not considered disgusting enough, because just walk away and you don't have to stay there. But again, we'll discuss it when we go through the Graf Shorei. Okay. So that's a good question. The dollar bill example. One is it muktza for just that person? Is not muktza just for the person giving the speech, or is it not muktza for everybody? Once that person makes it not muktza for himself, then anybody can use that dollar. Right now, I'm not saying that you should decide to take all your money and make it not muktza before Shabbos, right? You take all your money and make it not muktza because you want to be able to walk around with money in your pocket on Shabbos and show everybody that you have money. I don't know if that would be, it might not be allowed. I can't say for sure it's not allowed. Certainly not advisable. So you have to use your discretion, because it can cause some stress and some fights, but maybe it's worth it if you can teach somebody some muktza by saying you made this money not muktza from before Shabbos. But but if somebody makes that rock or that money not muktza, then it would go for everybody. It would be considered not muktza. Okay, so and another question is, if you find your $100 bill in your pocket or on the street. So we haven't gotten yet to, we mentioned it a little bit last week. We haven't gotten yet to the heterim for moving muktza. There is a way to move all sorts of muktza. So can you kick it? Actually, somebody asked this to me last Shabbos. He saw money on the street and he kicked it under a car. But the reason why he kicked it under the car is because he was afraid that people who are uneducated would just pick up the money, because it's, people find a lot of money, you get excited and they might just pick it up and carry it on Shabbos. So he had kicked it to the side on Shabbos in order to prevent other people from using it. But then he asked the Shiloh whether that was allowed to be moved or not allowed to be moved. And then if that's the case, which I told him that he should not have moved it, but what you can do is you could stand on the money for the whole Shabbos. And if you really want to make sure that you don't lose that money, whether you can move it or not, really you can move it by kicking it. But again, we'll discuss that when we discuss moving. But what do you do with the $100 that's in your pocket? So what you should do is go to a place. That would be a scenario where you're allowed to leave it in your pocket until you get to a safe place. And then you can pull out the pocket without touching the money. and in a place where it's going to be hidden, and then the $100 bill will fall out from your pocket. I actually had realized that my wallet was in my pocket from before Shabbos a couple of weeks ago, and I think it was in Shul. Yeah, I was by a simcha, and I went away for Shabbos, so I got dressed before Shabbos, and because I was driving, put my wallet into my clothing, and then at Shul Friday night, I realized my wallet was still in my pocket, so I walked over to the corner, and I pulled out my pocket and let the wallet go, and Baruch Hashem was still there on Muktza Shabbos. Yeah. So moving garbage cans in front of the house because they don't look nice it's a big debate whether you're allowed to do that. It's a big debate whether you're allowed to move them because you might get a ticket, right? Is that enough of a reason to move garbage cans because you may get a ticket? So if it's disgusting, there's a difference between disgusting because you don't like the way it looks and disgusting because you're playing around the garbage cans and it smells. If the kids or people are playing around the garbage cans and it smells, then that's certainly considered a graf shorei, which literally translated means it's a ball of garbage, right? Not a ball, whatever, it's a piece of garbage that's bothering you, and you would be allowed to move it. That goes without a doubt. Same thing with the feces from dogs and this and that. If it's disgusting to you, then you can move it, no problem. But the problem is, it's not so simple just for the looks. Is that considered mias, right? Is that disgusting or not? So let's say the kid leaves a kid or an adult, usually a male, leaves the hammer or tools sitting in the living room before Shabbos. Now it's Friday night, it's a thing of tools. So can that be moved? Can it not be moved? So then we have to fit into which types of muksas it is. And then the last ditch effort would be, maybe it's disgusting, right? A male won't find it disgusting, but a female will find it disgusting to have this thing sitting in the middle of her living room. Now it's not disgusting per se, it's just disgusting her. So is that really considered disgusting or not? Okay, we'll discuss that. But these are all issues that come up. So usually, yes, if something's muktza machmas mias, then you would be able to move it. But you're saying, so why is there ever a case of muktza machmas mias? That would be in a scenario where you can leave the room, let's say. Right? Let's say it's disgusting, but it's not disgusting you. So can you move it? Right? For example, you're walking in the street and you walk past some dog. A dog goes to the bathroom. Somebody didn't clean up after the dog. So that's disgusting, but you don't have a heter to move it because it's not, you move, you leave. Don't have to stand there, which again is a debate, which we'll discuss when we do that, but that would be the scenario. But yes, most scenarios of muktza machmas mias you would be able to move it if it's in your house and it's disgusting, right? How far can you walk with the muktzah in your pocket? As far as you want, because again, not in using, meaning as far as you can go in order to find where a private place to put it. And if you can, then it means walking till you get home with it, and that's what you'd be able to do. Okay, so now let's just review again. There's really five. There's a little bit more muktzas, but the five major categories of muktzas are muktza machmas gufay, meaning it itself intrinsically is asur. Right? There's nothing for you to do with it. We said a rock, money. There's nothing for you to do with it on Shabbos unless you need the rock to hold open the door, or like some say when they throw the rocks at the people being Machal Shabbos in Eretz Yisrael, maybe they specify which rocks they're going to use before Shabbos. That's one. Muktza machmas gufay, it's intrinsically asur. Muktza machmas chesar and kiss, it's something that's asur because you're afraid that you're going to lose it or lose money, or you wouldn't ever use it only for its mamish, its specific intention, what it's meant to be using. You wouldn't use it for anything else. That would be considered muktza also. Then we had a kli shemalachta le'isur, which is a utensil that's meant to do things that you're not allowed to do on Shabbos, which is, we said, like a hammer, pots, actually pots in the kitchen, frying pans, and these type of things. We'll discuss that might be another example of a klisha malachta l'isser, but some say maybe it's muktzah machmas gufa, but that would be the third category. The fourth category is muktzah machmas mios. It's muktzah because it's disgusting, right? And then the last one is muktzah machmas isser. If it's something that you're not allowed to eat, let's say, so then that would also be muktzah, even though food itself really is not muktzah. So again, those are the five. And then the three examples that we always use for different reasons to move muktzah would be, you need it for gufay, you need the muktzah for itself, what it's meant to be used for, that's gufay, or you need mekaima, you need the place where the muktzah is. Or the third one is to move the muktzah for the muktzah's sake, which it's called mechamal itself, from the sun to the shade, which is there. You don't need the muktzah, and you don't need the place where the muktzah is, but you do want that muktzah to be to be safe and not to get ruined, which is obviously going to be the hardest one to be matter, because that's, you're not moving it because you need it for Shabbos, you're moving it for the muktzah's sake, which is not going to be so simple to allow. But Bez Hashem, in the coming weeks, we'll break that all down. I hope it was clear. If it's not, then please ask me and to repeat it next week. And hopefully we'll try and get this clear in the next few weeks. Okay, good talk, everybody. Good to y'all.